Hi everyone, so in this video I'm going to walk you through how to install RStan on a Windows machine in R. So in this video we're using Windows 10, and as you can see we're also using R through RStudio. Now the version of R that we're using is 4.1.3, and that's quite deliberate. So for anything before version 4.0, so R version 3.6, it's really not recommended to install Stan. So you really should be using something a bit later. But the reason why I'm not using version 4.2 is because that can get a little bit tricky. And the reason is that RStan is not currently available for version 4.2, so you have to use a preview version, and it's really messy and there's no guarantees that it'll work. So if you're really looking for a really clean install for RStan, recommend to use version 4.1.3. Now, when you install the RStan package, it's not exactly as simple as, saying install.package RStan. You actually have to do a little bit more, because you have to configure the C++ toolchain to be able to compile C++ code. And that's really important because that's what Stan uses. So there's a little bit more to it, but not too much more. One thing that's really good is that the developers of RStan have come up with a really nice, documentation for how to get started. And so really, all you need to do is follow along with the instructions, and that's essentially what I'm going to be basing this video on. So if we go down, you can find these instructions at the GitHub under the wiki section under R getting started. And of course we're using Windows machine, so the first thing we need to do is configure the C++ toolchain. So since we're using Windows machine, we're going to be clicking this link here, and we go down to our version of R, and we're using version R 4.x, not version R 4.2. So we'll go scroll down here, and the first thing that it's asked us to do is to remove any old RStan versions that we might have under 3.6. And so since we're using a totally fresh version of Windows and a totally fresh version of R, we don't need to do this, but in case you have done this, I'll just do it for completeness. So, the first thing you need to do is copy this command, go to RStudio, type it in. Obviously don't need this part. And then obviously you should be getting nothing returned. If you do get something returned, then you can follow along with the instructions specified, but since we didn't get anything, we can move to the next section. Now when we can configure the C++ toolchain, really that amounts to downloading and installing our RTools 4. And you can do that through this link, which is really good. So open that new tab. And here we will then download the executable, which we can find here. And this may take, it's not too big, it's only 166 megabytes, but depending on the speed of your internet, as you can see mine's pretty slow, this may take some time. So I'll probably speed up the video here and get back to you once it's almost finished. Alrighty, so this is almost finished downloading, and okay, now it's finished. So now what we're going to do is we're going to open it up and just run the executable. We're going to use all of the default settings, install it into the C drive, RTools 40, next, install. And this will then unpack all of the files and folders that you need into this directory. Great, okay, great. So now that's finished. Click finished, and we'll go back to our instructions. And so because now we've installed it, the last thing we need to do is to make sure that R can find it. And so that means we need to put it on the path. And so that's really easy to do. You just need to copy this line, which will write this code into the R environment file. So we'll copy this line, go in and paste it in. Okay, and then you should see a .renviron appear here, which is good. Then what you need to do is you need to close RStudio completely and then open it up again. So close it, open it up again. And then in order to verify that it's worked, we can then basically copy sys.which and then it should basically give us the path to RTools, which is right. Now we can make sure it completely works by trying to install a package from the source. And so in this case, that suggested that we install JSON Lite, so let's make sure that we can do that. Okay, and that seems like that's unpacked just fine. So now we are ready to download RStan and install it. So let's go back to the original documentation here and move on to the next section. So the first thing we need to do is, if we have RStan already installed, which we don't, we need to remove it. So that's fine. We don't need to do that section. Then if we are on a Linux system, we need to put this command in, but we're not on a Linux system, we're on a Windows system. So then the last thing we need to do is install packages RStan. In this case, we're going to specify what the repo is, and we're going to set dependencies equals to true. So install that. Now, because I have a completely fresh install of R, I don't have any other packages, so it's going to install all of the packages on this list, and this can take quite some time. So probably expect around 10 to 15 minutes if you're in the situation like me, where you have to download and install all of this, especially Stringy. Stringy can take quite a long time. Alrighty, so that looks like that has finished. That took around about 10 minutes. So if it takes a little bit shorter for you, that's awesome. If it takes a little bit longer, don't worry. So now that we've pretty much downloaded and installed RStan, we can test if it works. And if you go to the documentation, they do suggest one way to verify that it works, and we're certainly going to go and do this, but we're also going to verify it another way, which is to pretty much simulate how you might use it in real life. But anyway, let's use this first method. So we're going to copy this example here, paste it in here, and this pretty much should compile a predefined Stan code, sample from it, and that's pretty much it. So once we do that, it will load the headers, it will then compile the C++ code, and then after about 1 or 2 minutes, we should see on the output of the results of the sampling. Okay, and so that was a successful run. We can see the results of the sampling. You can see we had 4 chains, 2,000 samples each. And it looked like that all ran with no divergences, so that's pretty good. And we could probably walk away now and say that we've got a successfully installed version of RStan. One thing though I think is pretty helpful is if we sort of try and simulate how we might actually use this in real life. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder. Let's call it. That's not what it is. Let's go create a new folder. Let's call it test stan. And in test stan, we're going to create 2 files, a stan file and a R script. So let's go there. So new file, stan file. We'll just delete whatever comes up and we'll save it in test stan. Actually, we'll call it schools because that's the example that we're going to use. And we're also going to create a new file. It's just going to be an R script, and we're going to call this stan driver. So if we go back to the documentation, they actually give you a pretty nice example for which you can use. So you can read what the 8 school problems is all about, but essentially this is some code. They also give you some data that goes along with it. So we're going to try and sample from this stan model. So all we have to do is copy that in. Oops, paste that into the stan data and save. We can then obviously click check to compile and make sure it's syntactically correct. It's giving me a warning that there's an incomplete final line, so let's do that. Okay, it's all syntactically correct. That's really good. Now let's move on to the stan driver and just write a really minimalistic set of code that can compile and run our schools.stan file. So first what we need to do obviously is library RStan. Okay. And then what we need to do is get the data. We're going to be using something called schools data, which is good. And then we're going to create an object fit using the stan command. We will have to change the file location, and I'm operating from the root directory, so ~test_stan/schools. And this is our minimalistic code that we're going to be using to test whether Stan will work. So if I just highlight that all and run it, this essentially compile the school Stan model and sample from it and give me a fit object. And there we have it. It's pretty much compiled successfully. There doesn't seem to be any divergences. So we can say that we've installed RStan on our version 4.1.3 on a Windows 10 machine. That's pretty much it for the video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I have tutorials on Bayesian inference, Stan, and how Stan works under the hood. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.